The new Poco F4 GT has some top tier specs, but not when it comes to its 64 megapixel main camera. Can GCam improve photo quality? And are the F4 GT's pictures really worse than photos from other flagship phones like the OnePlus 10 Pro? The Poco F4 GT's stock camera app loads out the highlights in this first pink flower shot. I used a recent GCam port from developer BSG for this comparison, and it does a much better job constraining the highlights here. For this black car shot, both apps do a good job, but I prefer how much more contrasty GCam's photo is. If you're wondering about capturing quick-moving subjects like pets, children, or velociraptors, you'll want to stick with the stock Poco camera, and even then, you're lucky if you get a sharp photo. My dog wasn't even moving that fast for these pictures. This drainage ditch shot looks much better from GCam. More saturation, more contrast. Poco Cam doesn't do a bad job, but it's just a bit too bright and the clouds are slightly blown out. This is probably the most similar these cameras can look. This bottle of classic hazel saucer? I actually don't know what that stuff was or how it got in our house, but the only significant difference I can see is that GCam keeps the label entirely in focus, while Poco Cam does not. The trends continue with these photos of the most beautiful dumpster in the world. GCam's more contrasty and saturated. Poco Cam is overall brighter with some blown out clouds. Another flower shot this time, and I was gonna say that I prefer Poco's stock camera since it's sharper, has decent contrast, and is better exposed, but then I noticed the tree line. Poco Cam just doesn't quite know how to handle it. Here's a rusty AC unit, and even with the clipping and the highlights, I prefer the stock camera. GCam is just a bit too dark. Surprisingly, both reproduce these colors from the umbrella well, so I'm going to call this one a draw, since the only minor difference is that GCam's slightly less detailed in the fabric. Before we get into selfies, night mode shots, and the 10 Pro comparison, please give this video a like if you're finding it helpful, and thank you. This first selfie is from the main rear camera, and both do a respectable job, but I like the saturation and constrained highlights from GCam. Here's portrait mode with the main camera, and I prefer Poco camera this time, because GCam struggles to separate the top of my head from the background. Here's the actual selfie camera, and besides looking considerably darker and less saturated than the main, it's not terrible, but GCam easily wins since it can actually handle the sky and keep color in my face. Portrait mode with the selfie camera is much closer, but I do still prefer GCam since the halo around my head is much less prominent. Here's the first night mode shot from the main rear camera, and both apps do a good job in this very dark room. Poco camera is able to retain more detail, but the colors are slightly washed out. The selfie camera looks much worse, just darker, noisier, and even though GCam just starts smoothing everything out, I think it still wins. With this car shot outside, we see some major differences. GCam still continues to smooth out everything and shifts the colors heavily blue. Poco camera looks a lot more true to life since the closest light source is a very orange street lamp, and it's a lot sharper with more detail. Unfortunately, that just comes at the expense of lots of noise. For this fire hydrant, GCam wins, as it looks more natural even though it's softer than the stock camera. Both do a good job with my ferocious dog sleeping on the couch, but GCam is closer to the actual lighting in the room. I think I might prefer Poco Cam though, because there's just so much more detail in his fur. With this figure on top of the F4 GT box, we have the same issues. GCam is less noisy, but there's not much detail, and Poco Cam gives you plenty of detail, but too much noise, and it had a hard time with the blurry floor as well. Poco Cam wins for 4K video due to its much better stabilization, and selfie video is the same, both limited to 1080.
Here's selfie video from the Poco F4 GT. Hopefully this sounds alright, looks alright. We'll find out.
But is the F4 GT's camera system any worse than cameras found on more premium flagships? Here's the same pink flower shot from the Poco camera, GCam, and the main camera on the OnePlus 10 Pro. I'd say the Poco apps hold up quite well here. Black car shot, and again, each app produces different results, but the biggest difference is just the contrast on the 10 Pro's photo. For the drainage ditch, I can't quite put my finger on why, but I do prefer the OnePlus shot here. Maybe just a stronger bokeh effect on the background. Hazel bottle thing one more time, and besides being a little cooler in terms of color temperature, the Poco Cam and OnePlus Cam look very similar. The other flower shot looks more natural on the 10 Pro, but not radically different from the F4 GT. This selfie shot from the main rear cameras looks similar, just a bit washed out on the OnePlus. As does portrait mode. The OnePlus falls way behind with the selfie camera. Blown out sky, washed out skin tones. The Poco is simply better with both apps. OnePlus improves substantially with portrait mode on the selfie camera. Night mode is interesting here, since the OnePlus kinda takes the middle ground between the Poco stock camera and GCam. I think it's the best of both of the Poco's apps, sharper than GCam, but less noisy than the stock Poco Cam. It is eye-searingly orange though. I still prefer GCam for the fire hydrant, and both the stock OnePlus and Poco apps look somewhat similar. Lastly, this figure on the GT box looks the best from the OnePlus 10 Pro. The OnePlus keeps a lot of detail without noise and produces a brighter photo than the GT. For 4K video, both devices perform similarly, but I believe I like the Poco better.
Here's selfie video from the Poco F4 GT for you. Hopefully it sounds good. I don't know, we'll see.
Obviously, the OnePlus 10 Pro has a much improved camera system with a better ultra-wide camera, improved camera app, and more features like 8K video recording, 120 FPS 4K, and more. But I really think the F4 GT is quite comparable to the 10 Pro if you stick with the main sensor and use GCam half the time. Of course, you can always shoot more professionally with raw images, either from the Poco stock app, some GCam ports, or you could try Motion Cam, which allows you to take raw photos and shoot raw video. Here's a bubble sample at 60 FPS. That's 4K from the stock Poco app, but an even larger 4624 by 3472 using Motion Cam. Check out one of my Motion Cam videos here for more information. The only adjustments I made to GCam was to turn on HDR plus enhanced mode and change the amount of HDR frames to 30, which does take more processing time. All the stock Poco Cam shots were taken in HDR auto. If this has put your mind at ease about the Poco F4 GT's cameras and you want to pick one up, you should check out Wireless Place, since they have Poco devices as well as phones from Xiaomi, Samsung, Motorola, OnePlus, and more. I've bought a few phones from Wireless Place and they always ship fast and ship internationally, have great prices, and include a US adapter for the charger if you need it. Please use my discount code PC10 when you check out. If you want to support the channel or just want to save a little money, a link to the site is in the description. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and let me know if you thought this comparison format was helpful. Also, feel free to comment with any questions you might have, and I will answer them perfectly, unless I don't know or I can't find the answer.